Welcome back, guys. Mark here, and today I think we're going to finish out our dice roller series. So where we left off in lesson 5 is that we have everything built. We're generating rolls, we're outputting the text to our text editor window, the modifiers are working. So if you guys remember that, if we wanted to add 5 to our roll or subtract 5, that's all working at this point. So we have everything wired up, so to speak. So what we want to go ahead and do now is wire in the rest of our dice. And so let's go ahead and start that process. And to do that, first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add a little note here. I'm going to say 6-sided dice. And I'm going to format that over here. Let's see, tab it over. There we go. Perfect. And we're going to copy this entire block of code. Now, if you guys remember from our previous lessons, or you guys have heard me preach about it, that when we copy and paste code, that's where we can really introduce bugs, because we can forget to change something. So what we want to go ahead and do is make sure we change all these 4s in our tags here, our labeling, our handles, to 6s. Because we're on the 6-sided row now. So that's step 1. So we'll go through 6. We'll go down as we go through. So our text box, D6. So we're just going to go right down through and change all of these 4s to 6s on our 6-sided die. And so make sure we don't forget to do that on the 6-sided as well. You know, we just want to keep where we're at in our program. And okay, so change that one. And even here where it says D4, we want this label to be D6. Now if I run this, it's going to go ahead and build. And it's going to open our window. And you notice that the data is kind of empty here. Well, it's not really empty. We actually drew our 6-sided controls right on top of our 4-sided controls. So there's a text box on top of a text box and a button on top of a button. So what we need to go ahead and do is move those down. So on our 4-sided, they're at 40. And so what we want to do is move them down and pad them, like space in between them, like 5. So if you see, currently we're 25 high. So that gives us 65, and we want to pad it 5. So that'll give us 70. So we want to go and change all of our Y's. Don't do it there. See, right here. Let's do it on our 6-sided. On our 6-sided, change our Y's to 70. So they're down 70 more pixels. Now our button event handler, we're actually going to do that to 75 because they're at 45. So you take anything that's a Y and you just move it down 30. So 70, 70, 70, 70, and 70. So that's our 6-sided. So we're going to use all the same event handlers. And so now if we go ahead and we run this, we have our 4-sided, and now we have our 6-sided. Now, our buttons, bitmaps are up a little. I don't think that's going to be horrible, though. It's not a terrible spot. We could get finicky and try to move them down 2 or 3 more pixels. But we'll run through and we'll look at that as we go. But I like it. It looks good. It doesn't look horrible. We could tweak it if needed. So now we have to go ahead and do the rest of the things that populate our data in here. So the next thing is we need to go and basically we can copy this text. We can paste it here, and now we can say D6. D6. And then we have our, basically our D6 count. That's already here for us. So you see, by building this for our first die, we've actually built ourselves a blueprint to add any other dice after the fact. So D6 and then D6 count. So now if we run this, once again, we still can't click on any of the buttons. But now the boxes are disabled like we wish them to be. Like that's not going to do anything because we didn't wire these up. And then we actually have the number of dice in the box. So that's what we're actually looking for. So that's perfect. So now we kind of keep going down. We have our event handlers. And so the first event handler we're going to look at is our Bitmap button event handler. And basically we can copy all of this code. You guys might see a theme here. And this is kind of why I talked about, or I harped on, or however you want to word it, but I kind of mentioned this quite a few times about copying and pasting code. Because we're going to do copying and pasting, but we have to be diligent to change everything. So here we're looking for D6 up and D6 down. And so you guys can see it's just a matter of changing D4 and our 6-sided to D6. And so as we go down through, so D6, and it's just reading each line of code, making sure you don't forget anything. And I've forgotten stuff before, that happens. So it's not a horrible thing, but you know, that's why, you know, we go through, debug our code, and we'll find it. We'll find wherever the issue is, we'll fix it and get it running. So I'm going to scan it one last time, D6, D6, make sure we got all of our D6. All right, perfect. Now we can go to our checkbox set event handler. And once again, keeping with the theme, we're going to copy this. Hit enter here, line up the case. I'm all about formatting, so we're going to change this to do 6. Change this to 6. 6. There we go. So now that's our checkbox for our D6 positive and our checkbox for our D6 negative. And now we actually have the reset event handler. So we're going to copy that. And just really, if you guys are going down and you're doing this, you're doing things like this, I do one row at a time. And make sure that row works exactly, test it. A lot of self-testing. Because, you know, if I did the 6-sided, the 8-sided, the 10-sided, the 12-sided, 20 and the 100-sided all at once, you know, I could introduce a bug. And that, you know, would be really annoying. So we just want to make sure that we do each row. So I do it one row at a time. And then finally we have our roll for our D6. For our 6-sided die here. I keep calling it a D6. So we need to copy that whole block. Paste it, and then we got to go through. So D6. So button roll D6. So our D6 total equals 0. Clear our text editor. And then assign the variables for our D6 checkboxes, positive or negative. Grab the result, either one of those checked. And then we actually want to go ahead and call our function and pass in 6-sided. The rest of it stays the same except for the result and the D6 total. That way we can see what we rolled. And that should be our 6-sided die. Let's see. Roll dice. Oh, we got one more section we need to go ahead and touch. So all of this stays the same. We don't need to touch any of this. But inside of our roll dice function, we have to check the case against positive, negative, see what's checked. So we can copy this. I almost missed this. Hit enter. Go over here. Paste this in. So we're looking for 6. So that's the 6-sided, and the result stays the same. But once again, we need to just go in and edit the 6 here. Everything else stays the same. We just need to edit those 3 numbers here. So P result, N result. So that's the text box D6 mod, text box D6 mod. So positive or negative, perfect. Then everything else should roll right through. So let's save this. Let's run it. Make sure it works. So here's our D6. So let's just click roll. All right, we rolled a 6. That's a really good roll. And so let's roll 2 of them now. And now if you guys notice, when I rolled 2, I still only got 1. So we got to see why. So that's 3. So I don't know why we're not getting our full roll. So let's go ahead and look. Make sure we didn't miss anything. And right here, do you guys see this? Remember I talked about bugs? I forgot to put the D6 count. It's still looking at D4. I never changed D4. So that was my fault. I forgot that one thing in our function. So let's save that. Now let's go ahead and we rolled 1. Now let's roll 2 of those. There we go. 2D6. And we could keep going. 2D7. Perfect. So now it's going to add them all. So let's go ahead and bring it back down. And let's add 2 to our roll. 1d6 plus 2 is 4. So I rolled a 2. Let's subtract it, see what we get. 1d6 minus 2 is negative 1 because I rolled a 1, which is terrible. There we go. Now we're rolling a little better. So perfect. It works exactly the way we want it to. So everything's set up. So that's our next roll. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to add everything else, come back and show you guys the finished product. All right. I'll be back in a minute. And I'm back. I've added everything that we've needed. So if you go through and you look through and you see what I've done, let's go all the way back to the top. Now I did find one thing I just want to point out to you guys that I went through and fixed. So positive, the checkbox for positive, I actually had the P capitalized and it should have been lowercase instead of uppercase. So I went through and I made sure that all of the P's that I have for positive, POS, are lowercase. So I went through everything and I made sure of that. But as you look through, we have our 6, our 8, our 10, 12, 20, 100-sided die. I've added all of our disables that we needed and I've initialized the count. So number 1 is shown in each box. Then if you look down through, I've made sure I've set everything up for us. So I've gone through and wired this all together. Once again, I made sure all these P's were lowercase wherever I needed to, so you guys can see that probably took me a minute. But I don't want any bugs in our program. I want it to be clean. So I went through and added all of our case stuff for our rolls. So everything's in here. So if we go ahead and we run this now, you guys can see we have 7 types of dice in here. D4 all the way up to 100-sided. Roll 100-sided. I rolled a 16. Ooh, that's a terrible roll. 9, 69, dude. All right. Bill and Ted reboot. That's all I'm saying. Pretty cool. But as you guys can see, this all works. It's all wired up. As you go through, everything works. I've tested it extensively before coming back when we add anything to our rolls. So if I want to do a 5, it does work very well. If I want to subtract that, it works very well. If I uncheck it, it clears out our modifier text box. So all of this works very, very well, exactly the way we want it to. So if we roll a couple of 100-sided die, then it's all going to pop out nicely. So works exactly the way we want it to. Now, one thing I thought about doing at some point is maybe adding a reset button right here, which would set all of our dice numbers back to 1 and basically clear our modifiers and clear our results. So if I wanted to reset the dice roller and say I had, a bunch of numbers in here, and I didn't want to have to like click down, we could add in a reset button. I might do that just to polish it up later on, but it's nothing I'm going to do right now. But that's something I thought about doing. I'll mull it over a little bit more. But I hope you guys enjoyed the series. What I'll do is I'll actually post the zip link to my Dropbox in the video comment notes. So if you guys want to download it and see the whole project's going to be there. Source code and all. It's open source. Use as you want. Modify it. If you guys do use the code for something and you modify it, let me know how it works for you. I think that would be pretty cool. But I hope you enjoyed the series. I'm going to start another series here probably pretty soon. But if you liked the video, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave me any questions, comments. I will get back to you guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, guys.